What if I told you that the solution to rising grocery prices was buried in your backyard this whole time? There's one planting technique that produces more food per square foot than modern agriculture, requires almost zero maintenance, and works in practically any climate. The catch? Most people plant it completely wrong. For over 1,000 years, Native American tribes figured out something that modern agriculture is just now catching up to. They discovered that 3 specific plants, corn, beans, and squash, work together like the world's most efficient roommates. No drama, no competition, just pure cooperation. The Haudenosaunee people called them the 3 sisters, and honestly, the name fits perfectly. These plants are practically inseparable. Corn shoots up tall and straight, acting like a living fence post for bean vines to climb. Meanwhile, the beans are busy doing something amazing underground. They're literally making fertilizer out of thin air. Well, technically, they're converting nitrogen from the atmosphere into plant food, but making fertilizer out of thin air sounds way more impressive at dinner parties. Then there's squash, the overachiever of the group. Those giant leaves sprawl across the ground like nature's own tarp, keeping weeds from muscling in and preventing precious water from evaporating. It's like having a bouncer and a moisture manager all rolled into one plant. But here's where it gets interesting. This isn't just some happy accident that ancient farmers stumbled upon. This is companion planting at its finest. A system where plants actually help each other grow better than they would alone. Think of it as the agricultural equivalent of a great marriage, except with more vegetables and less arguing about whose turn it is to do the dishes. Modern scientists love throwing around fancy terms like polyculture and symbiotic relationships, but Native Americans were already living this reality centuries before anyone invented those words. They understood that nature works best when everything cooperates instead of competing. The really wild part? These 3 plants together create their own little ecosystem. The corn provides structure, the beans enrich the soil, and the squash protects everything. It's more efficient than most corporate teams I've worked with. Legend tells of 3 sisters who were so close they couldn't bear to be apart. When planted together, they thrived. When separated, they withered. The story isn't just beautiful, it's scientifically accurate. These plants have co-evolved to support each other in ways that would make a life coach weep with joy. Your typical suburban garden, with its neat little rows of single crops, suddenly looks pretty lonely by comparison, like hosting a party where everyone has to sit in separate rooms. Well, the science behind why these 3 work so perfectly together gets even more fascinating than the legend suggests. You know what's funny about beans? Most people think they're just sitting there looking pretty on their little vines. Wrong. Those humble little green pods are actually running a sophisticated chemistry lab right in your backyard. Here's the kicker. Beans have these tiny bacterial roommates called rhizobia living in their roots. These microscopic tenants pay rent by pulling nitrogen straight out of the air and converting it into plant food. It's like having a fertilizer factory that works for free, 24/7. Your corn neighbors get to feast on this nitrogen buffet without lifting a finger. But wait, it gets better. While the beans are playing chemist, the corn is busy being the neighborhood skyscraper. Those tall, sturdy stalks aren't just showing off. They're providing premium real estate for climbing beans. No expensive trellises needed. The beans literally hug their way up the corn stalks like they're old friends at a reunion. Then there's the squash, sprawling across the ground like it owns the place. And honestly, it kinda does. Those massive leaves act like nature's own weed barrier, blocking out sunlight so aggressively that weeds don't stand a chance. Meanwhile, that same leafy carpet traps moisture in the soil better than any plastic mulch you could buy at the garden center. The whole system runs like a well-oiled machine from the 50s. Simple, reliable, and built to last. The beans feed everyone nitrogen, the corn provides structure, and the squash keeps everything tidy and moist. It's teamwork that would make a corporate consultant weep with joy. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Modern research shows this ancient trio can actually outproduce those neat little rows of single crops that look so organized and proper. Turns out Mother Nature wasn't just being creative, she was being efficient. The biodiversity alone makes pests scratch their heads in confusion. When you've got 3 different plants growing together, bugs that specialize in attacking one crop suddenly find themselves in a botanical maze. It's like trying to find your favorite restaurant in a city where all the street signs are in different languages. Studies from agricultural universities keep confirming what Native Americans figured out centuries ago without any fancy degrees or laboratory equipment. The three sisters don't just grow well together, they actually make each other better. But here's what really separates this system from your typical backyard vegetable patch. When your grandmother opens her pantry in January and pulls out enough food to make a hearty stew, you're witnessing something our ancestors perfected centuries ago. The three sisters aren't just pretty plants that get along well, they're a complete nutritional powerhouse that can keep your family fed when the grocery stores are bare. Think about it this way. Corn gives you the carbohydrates that fuel your day, like nature's own energy drink, but without the crash. Beans pack enough protein to make a bodybuilder jealous. Plus, they're loaded with fiber that keeps everything running smoothly, if you catch my drift. Then there's squash, stuffed with vitamins A and C, plus enough potassium to make a banana feel inadequate. But here's where it gets really clever. These three crops together create what nutritionists call a complete protein, meaning they contain all the essential amino acids your body needs. It's like having a perfectly balanced meal growing right in your backyard, no fancy supplements required. The real magic happens after harvest season ends. Unlike those delicate tomatoes that turn to mush if you look at them wrong, the three sisters were built for the long haul. Corn kernels can be dried and stored for years without losing their nutritional punch. Beans practically beg to be dried. They'll keep in cool, dry storage longer than some marriages last. And winter squash? Those tough-skinned beauties can sit in your root cellar for months, getting sweeter with age. Native Americans figured out storage techniques that would make modern preppers weep with envy. They dig underground caches lined with bark and stones, creating natural refrigerators that protected their harvest through the harshest winters. Some tribes would bury sealed containers of corn and beans that stayed fresh for 3 to 4 years. Then there's the insurance factor that really sets this system apart. When you're growing just one crop and disease strikes, you're looking at beans and rice for dinner again. But with three sisters, if corn borers attack your stalks, you've still got beans and squash. If squash bugs show up uninvited, your corn and beans keep producing like nothing happened. This diversity meant entire communities could weather bad years without facing starvation. One crop might struggle, but the other two would pick up the slack. Well, knowing what these plants can do for your dinner table is one thing. But understanding how Native Americans turned this natural partnership into a survival strategy that supported whole civilizations, that's where the real genius shows itself. The Native Americans didn't just stumble onto this farming miracle by accident. These folks were serious agricultural scientists. They just didn't wear lab coats or publish research papers. Over thousands of years, they turned wild teosint, a scraggly grass with seeds smaller than your pinky nail, into towering corn stalks heavy with kernels. That's like turning a Chihuahua into a Saint Bernard through pure patience and observation. Each generation saved seeds from their best plants, slowly creating varieties perfectly suited to their local conditions. Take the Hopi corn, for example. This remarkable variety sends roots down 15 feet to find water in desert soil. 15 feet. Most modern corn varieties would throw in the towel after 2 feet and demand an irrigation system. But here's where it gets really impressive. The Iroquois developed over 60 different varieties of corn alone. Not just different colors, though their purple, white, and yellow kernels looked like nature's own confetti, but varieties with different purposes. Some for grinding into flour, others for popping over winter fires, and special varieties that could handle early frosts or late plantings. The beans weren't forgotten either. Native peoples cultivated climbing beans, bush beans, and everything in between. Runner beans that could scramble 20 feet up a cornstalk, or compact varieties that stayed close to the ground. Each type perfectly matched to its role in the Three Sisters ecosystem. Then there's the squash story that really shows their ingenuity. They developed varieties with different maturation times, so fresh squash was available all season long. Some had thick shells perfect for winter storage, natural Tupperware that lasted months. Others had tender skins for immediate eating. The seeds were roasted for protein, the blossoms were stuffed and eaten as delicacies, and the mature shells became bowls, rattles, and water containers. What really sets my jaw dropping is how they understood soil chemistry before anyone knew what nitrogen was. They noticed beans made the soil richer and corn grew taller after a bean crop, so they started planting them together, creating a living fertilizer factory. These weren't just farmers. They were geneticists, soil scientists, and nutritionists all rolled into one. They understood that survival meant working with nature, not against it. Every seed saved, every planting decision, every harvest technique was tested by the ultimate judge, whether their families would eat well through the winter. This wasn't a hobby gardening. This was life and death agriculture that fed entire nations for centuries. And the best part? Their methods still work today, which brings us to something pretty exciting you can do in your own backyard. Ready to bring this ancient magic to your own backyard? Well, the good news is you don't need a degree in agriculture or even a green thumb that's particularly impressive. The Three Sisters are about as forgiving as your grandmother when you show up late to dinner. Start by picking a sunny spot in your yard. These plants love sunshine more than retirees love early bird specials. You'll need roughly a 10 by 10 foot area, though even smaller spaces work if you're creative with your layout. Here's where it gets interesting. Forget those perfectly straight rows you see in modern gardens. The Three Sisters prefer a more relaxed arrangement, kind of like a casual family gathering rather than a formal dinner party. Create small mounds of soil about 3 feet apart from each other. Each mound should be roughly 18 inches wide and 6 inches high. Plant your corn first. Drop 4 to 6 corn seeds into each mound, spacing them about 6 inches apart. This gives you natural backup plants in case some don't germinate. Wait 2 weeks after the corn sprouts and reach about 4 inches tall before adding the beans. Now comes the fun part. Plant your bean seeds around the base of each corn stalk, about 3 inches away from the corn. The beans will eventually climb these natural poles like tiny green mountaineers. Choose pole beans, not bush varieties, because bush beans are basically the couch potatoes of the bean world. 2 weeks after planting beans, add the squash seeds to the edges of each mound. These will sprawl outward, creating that living mulch we talked about. Winter squash varieties work best since they store longer than their summer cousins. But here's the secret sauce most gardening books won't tell you. Water deeply but less frequently. This encourages the roots to grow deeper, making your plants more drought-resistant than a cactus at a pool party. The maintenance? Almost laughable compared to traditional gardens. Pull obvious weeds early on, but once the squash leaves spread out, they'll handle most of the weed control for you. Add some compost around the mounds mid-season if you're feeling generous, but these plants aren't particularly demanding. By harvest time, you'll have enough corn, beans, and squash to make your neighbors wonder if you've been secretly attending agricultural college at night. Speaking of harvest time, there's actually a specific strategy for getting the most out of your Three Sisters garden that most people completely mess up. Your grandmother probably knew more about soil health than most modern farmers with their fancy degrees. Meanwhile, today's industrial agriculture treats dirt like it's just something to hold plants upright while we dump chemicals on everything. Kind of like using duct tape to fix a Ferrari engine, isn't it? Here's the thing about monoculture farming. Growing endless rows of the same crop year after year. It's like eating nothing but pizza for every meal. Sounds great at first, but eventually your body starts falling apart. The soil does the same thing. When you plant thousands of acres of corn and nothing else, the ground gets stripped of specific nutrients. Then what happens? Farmers have to buy expensive fertilizers to replace what nature used to provide for free. Makes about as much sense as throwing away your wallet and then wondering why you're broke. But those clever Native Americans, they figured out the secret thousands of years ago. Their Three Sisters gardens actually improved the soil over time instead of destroying it. The beans pulled nitrogen from the air and stuffed it into the ground like little green factories working around the clock. Modern studies are finally catching up to what Indigenous people knew all along. Research shows Three Sisters plots can produce just as much food per square foot as conventional farming, but with zero synthetic fertilizers, zero pesticides, zero fancy equipment that costs more than most people's houses. The yield. Numbers don't lie either. A properly managed Three Sisters garden can feed a family of 4 from a plot smaller than most suburban driveways. Compare that to industrial farming, where you need massive machinery, irrigation systems, and enough chemicals to stock a laboratory. Then there's the pest problem. Monoculture farms are basically all-you-can-eat buffets for bugs. When corn beetles find a 1,000-acre cornfield, they throw a party that lasts all season. But in a Three Sisters garden, the diversity confuses pests and attracts beneficial insects that keep the troublemakers in check. Climate change researchers are scrambling to find sustainable farming methods that won't destroy the planet. Meanwhile, the solution has been growing in Native American gardens for centuries. It's like spending millions developing a better mousetrap when the cat was sitting right there the whole time. The really embarrassing part? Soil scientists now admit that traditional polyculture systems like the Three Sisters create healthier, more resilient ecosystems than anything modern agriculture has invented. Ancient Wisdom 1, Fancy Technology 0. Speaking of resilience, you'll want to know how these gardens handle everything from droughts to downpours. Getting a Three Sisters garden right is like tuning an old radio. One tiny adjustment can be the difference between perfect harmony and complete static. And trust me, these ancient plants have been around long enough to be pretty particular about their preferences. The biggest mistake new gardeners make? Cramming everything together like passengers on a rush hour subway. Your corn needs about 12 inches between stalks, or those beans will turn your corn stalks into the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Nobody wants wobbly corn that falls over faster than a house of cards in a windstorm. Spacing matters for the squash, too. Those leaves might look small when you plant them, but give them 6 weeks and they'll spread out like your uncle at Thanksgiving dinner. 3 feet between squash plants keeps everyone happy and prevents that jungle gym effect where nothing gets enough light. But here's where it gets interesting. Rotation isn't just some fancy gardening term your neighbor throws around. Move your Three Sisters plot to a different spot every 3 years. Why? Well, even nitrogen-fixing beans can't work miracles forever. The soil needs a break, kind of like how you need a vacation after dealing with your relatives for too long. Speaking of soil health, don't forget the compost. Add a shovelful to each planting mound every spring. It's like giving your garden a multivitamin, except this one actually works. The earthworms will throw you a parade. Now, if you live somewhere that makes penguins feel at home, start your seeds indoors 6 weeks before the last frost. Corn especially hates cold soil more than cats hate bath time. Those seeds will just sit there pouting until things warm up properly. Here's a trick. Most gardening books won't tell you. Plant your corn in blocks, not rows. 4 stalks in a square pattern pollinate better than a single line. Wind carries pollen sideways, not in straight lines like some military formation. Water deeply but less frequently. These plants develop tough root systems over thousands of years. They don't need daily babying like some hothouse flowers. Think of them as the pickup trucks of the plant world. The real magic happens when you stop overthinking everything. These 3 crops figured out how to work together before humans invented the wheel. Sometimes the best gardening advice is simply getting out of their way and letting nature handle the details. Once you see how resilient this system really is, you'll understand why it survived centuries without modern intervention. You know what the best part about ancient wisdom is? When modern science finally catches up and admits the old folks were right all along. Well, grab your lab coats because researchers have been putting Three Sisters gardens under the microscope, and the results are making conventional farmers sweat like a turkey in November. A landmark study from Cornell University compared Three Sisters plots against modern monoculture farms. The results? Traditional gardens matched conventional corn yields while using 0 synthetic fertilizers. 0! Meanwhile, the bean harvest was pure bonus protein that monoculture plots never even attempted to grow. It's like getting a free side dish that happens to be the most nutritious thing on your plate. But here's where things get really interesting. Soil samples from established Three Sisters gardens show nitrogen levels that would make chemical fertilizer companies weep into their profit margins. After just 3 growing seasons, the soil becomes richer and more balanced than ground that's been pumped full of expensive additives for decades. The protein content analysis will knock your socks off. These heritage varieties of corn and beans contain up to 40% more protein than their commercial cousins. Apparently, when plants aren't stressed out by chemical warfare, they have energy left over to actually be nutritious. Who would have thought? Then there's the drought resilience data that'll make you question everything about modern agriculture. During the brutal Midwest drought of 2022, conventional cornfields withered like bad investments. Three Sisters plots, they kept producing. The squash leaves had been maintaining soil moisture all season long, creating their own little oasis while neighboring farms turned to dust. And here's my favorite part: pest damage reports. Commercial farmers spend fortunes on pesticides, yet Three Sisters gardens show 60% less pest damage naturally. Turns out biodiversity is like having a neighborhood watch program for your vegetables. Who knew? Dr. Sarah Martinez from the University of Vermont tracked families growing Three Sisters gardens for 5 years. Her conclusion? These plots consistently fed families through winter months while requiring 70% less water and maintenance than traditional vegetable gardens. One family stored enough dried corn and beans to last 14 months. That's not just gardening. That's insurance you can eat. The soil gets healthier every year instead of more depleted. Plants grow stronger without chemical crutches. Families eat better while spending less on groceries. Makes you wonder why we ever thought we could improve on something that worked perfectly for thousands of years. Sometimes the best innovation is simply remembering what we forgot.